At some point in every NBA season, the standings stop telling us the truth. Some teams look great on paper, some are riding hot streaks, and only a few are actually built to survive 4 playoff rounds. This video is about drawing that line. By the end of this, you'll know which teams have a real championship case right now, and which ones don't, no matter what the record might be telling you. And starting off at tier number 5, working our way up to number 1, we have the outside chances. And this is where we have the Orlando Magic, Raptors, and Cavaliers. Starting off in Orlando, their season has really been defined by injuries, and that's made it hard to get a clean read on who they actually are. When Paolo Banchero went down, Franz Wagner stepped up and ran the team. And during that stretch, Orlando were genuinely a good team, even earning them a trip to Vegas. But almost as soon as Paolo came back, Franz went down, and he's now been out for over a month. Since then, the Magic have gone 7-9, as the numbers have really dropped off hard. They're sitting with the 27th ranked offense at just 111.6 points per 100 possessions, and a 16th rated defense allowing 115.8, which just isn't even close to contender level play. But what makes things frustrating is how when Franz was running the show, they were 5th in the NBA for net rating at plus 7.5, had a 119.6 offensive rating, and a 112.1 defensive rating. Numbers that are good enough to take a team really deep into the playoffs. But this team just has not had their guys all available for really any kind of stretch this season, which makes it really difficult to read them. Now let's move on to the Raptors, as this has been a really tough competitive group all season long, and it's mostly built off their defense. They rank 7th in the NBA with a 113 defensive rating, which gives them a really solid foundation. The problem, though, is the offense, which has been good enough to steal some wins, but not really good enough to strongly push them forward. Brandon Ingram has come in and given them a clear offensive focal point. But the big question is actually RJ Barrett. When Barrett, Ingram, and Scotty Barnes are all on the floor together, Toronto hasn't been able to defend at the same level, with their defensive rating dropping to 116.3 in those minutes. At the same time, though, RJ clearly helps them on the other side, with the Raptors posting a 117.5 offensive rating when he's in the game, which sits in the 66th percentile. That is the tension point right now for Toronto, deciding whether to live with that trade-off or continue to shop RJ Barrett around in the trade market for a better fit. Now with the Cleveland Cavaliers, this has been the most disappointing team this season. They're sitting 7th in the Eastern Conference, only 4 games above 500, which would have sounded unbelievable coming into this season. Donovan Mitchell has been excellent, averaging 29.8 points per game on strong efficiency. And the offense for this team hasn't really been the problem, ranking 10th best in the NBA with a 117 offensive rating. The problem has been on the defensive side of the floor. And more than anything, it's the consistency. They're 12th in the league for defensive rating at a 114.9, which on the surface doesn't sound too horrible, but that's a misleading number. Since the 1st of December, Cleveland has been a bottom 10 defense, allowing 117.3 points per 100, which puts them 20th in the league on that side of the ball. The leap many people expected from Evan Mobley really hasn't happened either. Garland still looks banged up at times, and the team just doesn't feel hungry. You'll see flashes of last season's 60-win group, but then you'll get just as many stretches where the team completely falls apart, like that 3rd quarter against Minnesota where they got outscored 43-22. It's an effort and focus issue more than anything in Cleveland, and until that can change, it's hard to take them seriously as a real threat. Alright, now let's move on to tier 4, the long shots. And this is where we have the Lakers, Suns, Warriors, and 76ers. Starting off with the Los Angeles Lakers, they sit 5th in the West, And on paper, the offense looks good, ranking 9th at a 117.8 offensive rating. But the reason they're down here is because of the defense, which is 21st in the NBA, giving up 118 points per game. And it's hard to see how this roster ever becomes consistently good on that side of the floor for a full 48 minutes. What makes them tricky to evaluate, though, is how dominant they've been in the clutch, going 13-1 on the year, with the #1 clutch time defensive rating at 89.1. And on top of that, they're also #1 on the other side of the floor with a clutch time offensive rating of 132.4. They've legitimately been the clutch time kings. The issue is sustaining that level. Luka Doncic, while being fantastic overall, has really hurt this team at time with turnovers, fouls, and shooting. He's averaging 4.5 giveaways a game, shooting just 32% from 3 on 10.2 attempts a game, while leading the NBA in field goal attempts at 22.5 a night. Fouling, his other problem, was really put on full display when he fouled out in the loss to Milwaukee at home, when the Lakers really had clear momentum. Add in a weak bench and an inconsistent defense, and it's clear that they are going to need a more locked-in version of Luka Doncic and potentially a trade deadline move to really have a legitimate shot. Now, let's go to the Valley of the Sun, because Phoenix have honestly been one of the better feel-good stories this season. They just recently beat Oklahoma City and sit with the 12th best offense at a 116.5 rating and the 9th best defense at 113.5 points allowed per 100 possessions. Devin Booker's back to his best basketball, and the team plays hard and genuinely looks connected, which really matters. A huge part of this has been the addition of Dillon Brooks, who's giving them 21.2 points per game on 53% effective field goal shooting, legitimately playing like a borderline all-star. The problem with this group, though, is pretty obvious. The overall star power is just not there. Even with how hard they play, it's tough to believe that this group can beat elite teams 4 times out of a 7-game series. Jalen Green has only played in 2 games so far this season, and his return could help, but after how much he struggled in the playoffs last year with Houston, you really can't bank on this guy to come back and suddenly push you into the conversation of real title contenders. With the Golden State Warriors, they're in a strange spot that really explains why they land here in the long shots tier. On the surface, the defense has been solid, ranking 8th in the league with a 113.4 defensive rating, but the offense sits at 19th, only putting up 114.9 points per 100 possessions. A big reason for this is what I call the Steph Curry problem. When Steph is on the floor, the offense is great, sitting at a 121.2 offensive rating, but the defense completely crumbles, giving up 117.3. When Steph sits, though, it flips the other way. The offense completely falls off to a 108.6 rating, but the defense now is elite at a 106.9 defensive rating. It's either great offense with bad defense or great defense with bad offense, and the Warriors just cannot find the middle ground. That's why the deadline matters a lot for Golden State as well. It's clear that they need a younger, contributing player who could potentially help them defensively in lineups with Steph, but also be able to contribute offensively when Curry's out of the game, because Steph still looks like that guy, and I still cannot fully count this team out given their championship history. But without solving that balance issue, a real championship run is going to be impossible. Now, moving on to the Philadelphia 76ers, this is a team that I had below the contending line in my last video, but I've decided to move them up. And health is the main reason why. Since December the 1st, the Sixers have had the 4th best defense in basketball, allowing just 111.5 points per 100. And this is where I really start to get intrigued. They play hard, they play with energy, and now the numbers are starting to back it all up. Joel Embiid also looks like he's getting back to MVP level basketball, as over his last 10 games, he's putting up 28.3 points per game on 61% true shooting, which is just elite production from the big man. But he's not doing it alone either. Tyrese Maxey has been at that level all season long, putting up 30.7 points per game and 6.9 assists on the season, while shooting 40% from deep and 60% true shooting. When you combine that 1-2 punch with the depth that they have and the fact that the Eastern Conference feels really shaky at the top, this team all of a sudden becomes really difficult to ignore. They're absolutely still a long shot, but the ceiling is clearly higher than it looked early in the year. Alright, now let's move on to Tier 3, the Dark Horse Contenders. And here I have the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Timberwolves. Starting in Boston, they've climbed a lot higher in these rankings than I ever expected coming into the season. Right now, they sit 4th in the NBA for net rating at plus 7.2, and a huge reason for that is how absurdly good they've been offensively. Boston currently owns the 2nd rated defense in the NBA, putting up 123.2 points per 100, which is honestly wild considering they haven't had Jason Tatum for a single second of this season. It actually gets even crazier when you zoom in further, because since December the 1st, they've actually been the #1 offense in basketball. That's where this starts to feel really dangerous, because Jason Tatum is expected to come back in early March, possibly even sooner. JT's return should help to patch up some of their defensive issues, where Boston currently ranks 16th with a 116 defensive rating, which is largely due to the front court limitations. Tatum's defense has long been underrated, and last season, there were long stretches where Boston was using him as a small ball 5 on defense and a point guard offensively. That's how reliable Jason Tatum is. Jaylen Brown has been the engine of the team this season, taking a real leap as the clear #1 option and proving he can carry an elite offense by himself. So when Tatum comes back, he's not going to have to dominate the ball and be his All-NBA version immediately. So if Jason Tatum can just be attacking closeouts, moving the ball quickly, and giving them more size on the defensive side of the floor, he's going to make this team legit. Next up, we've got the New York Knicks. And this is a team that I had a lot higher earlier in the season before some of the cracks started to show. Offensively, they're still elite, sitting 3rd best in the NBA with a 121.8 offensive rating. And that side of the ball really isn't my concern. The issue is, of course, the defensive side of the floor, which has dropped off a lot more than I thought it would. Overall, New York has the 17th rated defense this season, allowing 117 points per 100 possessions. And that alone puts a cap on how high they can go. It gets even more worrying though when you look at their recent form, because since the 1st of December, they've fallen all the way down to 24th defensively with a defensive rating of 119.4, which is really bad. Josh Hart being out has clearly hurt this team, especially when it comes to energy, hustle plays, and physical defense. Still, this team should not completely fall apart on defense just because one guy's missing. They have enough talent and experience to be better than this, and it honestly feels like a bit of a hangover after their NBA Cup win. Even with the defensive issues though, I still trust this team in the playoffs more than most, mainly because Jalen Brunson gives them a steady hand late in ball games. That's why they stay in this tier and don't drop even further. Then we've got the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have quietly been one of the best teams in basketball since the 1st of December. They started the season slowly, but over this stretch they flipped the switch, posting the 5th best offense in the league at a 119.2 rating, and they rank 7th on the other side of the floor with a 113.4 defensive rating. That That balance is exactly what you want to see, and the results back all this up. Since Thanksgiving, Minnesota owns the #1 record in the NBA at 15-6, which tells you how consistently they've been executing on both sides of the floor. Anthony Edwards is having his career best season, giving the Wolves 29.2 points per game on 59% effective field goal shooting, along with knocking down 41% from three. The thing holding this team back though is that they still feel like they're missing something. The internal growth they were banking on after losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker really hasn't shown up yet, as Rob Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. haven't been productive in their sophomore seasons, which has put a lot more pressure onto Edwards and the rest of the starting group. Bones Highland though has been a pleasant surprise, but they absolutely still need another guard who can handle the ball and effectively run sets in a playoff situation. However, this group has been to back-to-back conference finals now. They've proven that they're good enough to beat elite teams, and now it's starting to feel like everything's clicking once again. Alright, now let's move on to Tier 2, the Inner Circle contenders. And this is where I've got the Spurs, Pistons, and Rockets. Starting off with the San Antonio Spurs, as they have just continued to roll. At this point, it's impossible to ignore how real of a threat they've become. They're now 27-11, sitting second in the Western Conference, and they've done this with Victor Wembanyama still not back to full starter minutes. Just as they were ramping him up, he suffered a knee scare, and now he's back to coming off the bench. Yet, the Spurs have still been playing really high-level basketball. Since December 1st, they are third in the NBA for defense, with a 111.3 defensive rating and 11th offensively at a 117.5, which is an impressive balance for any contender. The on-off numbers with Wembanyama really underline how important his role is. When he's off the floor, San Antonio has a 117.3 defensive rating, and the second he gets back in the game, that drops all the way down to a 106.9 defensive rating. That's an enormous defensive impact, and it's exactly why getting him back in the starting five and around 30 minutes a night is absolutely a must over the next month or so. What really makes this team scary though is how they've been able to survive without having to lean on him very hard. De'Aaron Fox looks like an all-NBA guard yet again, controlling games, expertly running the pick and roll, and doing a brilliant job of setting the tone in these games. The Spurs are just super deep, with 8 guys averaging more than 10 points per game this season. This rise came way faster than anybody thought, and being able to maintain their winning while managing Wemby's minutes carefully is exactly why they firmly belong in the inner circle of contenders now. For the Detroit Pistons, they've absolutely cemented themselves as the best team out in the East. When you beat your best challenger by 31 points like they just did to the Knicks, that sends the NBA world a very clear message. Cade Cunningham has been phenomenal recently, averaging 28.3 points, 11.3 assists, and 5.3 rebounds over his last 6 games on 64% true shooting, including 43% from deep after struggling early in the year. On the season, Detroit owns the second best offensive rating in basketball, allowing just 110 points per 100 possessions. And they pair that with the 7th best offensive rating at 118.2. Since the 1st of December though, their defense has gone to a new level, ranking first in the league for defense at a 108.2 defensive rating. Yes, they are now better than Oklahoma City on the defensive side of the floor. They're physical by design. They foul more than anybody in the league, and they completely dominate the paint, ranking second in the NBA for points in the paint at 57.7 a game. Their weakness though is outside shooting. They're 27th in 3-point attempts and just 17th in percentage. And for Cade Cunningham, he could really use more floor spacing. Adding another high-level shooter before the playoffs would absolutely raise raise their ceiling. But even with that flaw, this team is still legit. Now, let's move on to the Houston Rockets, who are still in this tier, but I was very close to knocking them down because there's been some concerns that have started to be hard to ignore. On the surface, the season-long numbers are still elite. They've got the 4th best offense in basketball and the 3rd best defense, giving them the 2nd best net rating in the league at a plus 8.9. Those numbers would usually scream from the mountaintops, title contenders. But the issue is what's happening late in ball games. The Rockets have struggled badly in clutch time, sitting at 7-11 on the year with the 20th ranked clutch time offense at a 106.8 rating and a poor clutch time defensive rating of 119.4. That is a massive problem, especially for a team that has this much talent. A big part of that comes down to lineup decisions. It genuinely feels like they overthink things late in games, especially with how they're using Kevin Durant, who should be simplifying everything, but instead he gets pulled into overly complex actions that just invite teams to trap him. The Steven Adams minutes in the clutch have been especially hard to watch. Adams has an 88.2 clutch time offensive rating and a 130 clutch time defensive rating, which are brutal numbers by any standard, and he's already played in 12 clutch time games this season. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. Alperen Şengün's absence has hurt, but even without him, this team has still blown games it controlled, including back-to-back losses to the Blazers, where they collapsed late in those games. I do still believe in their overall profile, but clutch habits really matter. And right now, that's the one thing that Houston really need to fix, and they need to do it urgently. Alright, now let's move on to tier number 1, the favorites. And this is where I've got the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. Starting off in Oklahoma City, who are my 2nd most likely team to win the title this season. They've been elite defensively for what feels like years now, but this last stretch of the season has been interesting in a different way. After starting 24-1 and looking like a team that might challenge the all-time winning record, they've come right back down to earth, going 6-4 over the last 10 since those games against San Antonio. This team no longer feels like an outlier, which is really exciting for the league, but definitely concerning for Oklahoma City. Even through this rough patch though, they've still been 2nd in the league for defensive rating since the 1st of December, which just speaks to how strong their defensive foundation really is. They've also been missing key front court pieces, especially Isaiah Hartenstein. And once this group is able to get their championship caliber starting 5 fully healthy for an extended stretch, I believe the margin should tighten yet again. I don't think the version of this team we saw to start the season, where they were shooting mid-40s from 3 and went 24-1, is actually how good they are. But I also don't think they're as bad as this recent 10-game stretch would suggest either. Realistically, Oklahoma City lives somewhere between that peak and this recent stretch, and in my opinion, it's a lot closer to the early dominance than the final 10 games. With how good SGA has still been this season, both as a scorer and now a playmaker, along with this level of defense that they still have, Oklahoma City are absolutely still one of the favorites to win the title. But they're not number 1, because I've still got Denver as my favorite to win it all this season. We haven't seen the Nuggets fully healthy in months, and while Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown are finally back, Nikola Jokic is still expected to miss a few more weeks. That's obviously not ideal, especially with Jamal Murray having to carry a much heavier load. But what's really impressed me is how competitive they've stayed even without the Joker. Over the last 6 games without Nikola, they've gone 3-3, and they picked up 2 big wins on the road against Boston and Philadelphia. That really matters. It shows the floor of this team is still relatively competitive, even when everything is far from perfect. I actually think this stretch could help the Nuggets in the long term. The role players are getting real minutes right now, real responsibilities, and building confidence that might really matter once the rotations tighten again in the playoffs. When I sit here and picture a postseason rematch with the Thunder, I'm still leaning towards Denver. Last season, it was one of the greatest offenses ever against one of the best defenses we've ever seen, and the margins decided that series, especially after Aaron Gordon went down. This season, Denver's defense is way better, even if the numbers don't show it right now. Bruce Brown is back, which is a big reason why, and they've also gotten a sneaky leap out of Peyton Watson. Then when you look in the starting five, you've still got Aaron Gordon, Christian Brown, and now Cam Johnson, who's definitely a better defensive player than MPJ. But at the end of the day, the reason why Denver are the #1 team for me is how nobody has any kind of an answer for Nikola Jokic in a 7-game series. If the Nuggets can get healthy at the right time, this feels like the best version of the Nuggets we've ever seen, and they're absolutely still my pick to win it all. And the team that I think has the best chance to come out of the East and challenge Denver in the finals is the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham is the reason why. And if you want to see how he's taken the leap into true superstardom this season, then you can go ahead and watch that full breakdown video right now.